If you're interested in red light therapy, and in particular the Biomax panels from Platinum LED Lights, you're gonna love this video. Hey guys, Alex here from alexfergus.com, and in this video I'm interviewing the founder of Platinum LED Therapy Lights. His name is Mark Sawyer, and him and I have been speaking for a few years now since I tested the Biomax back in, I think it was 2018, 2019, when the Biomax 600 came out as my top overall body panel for that year. If you've been following my work, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the Biomax panels, and I have used them extensively and reviewed them extensively as well here on my channel and over on my blog. So I've learned a lot from Mark. He's very passionate, very switched on, not only with red light therapy, but also LED lights and grow lights, which was actually how he got into the red light therapy space. He knows a lot about the products, he knows a lot about the science, he knows a lot about making these panels, and if you've seen the new 2021 Biomax panels that have been released, you'll know that the new panels are quite innovative and very powerful. In fact, the Biomax 600 is the most powerful panel I've tested to date. So I was really excited to get on a call with him. I pick his brain about a lot of things, not only the new panels, but also some industry insights and secrets that not everyone knows about. But the most important thing, I know a lot of you guys will be keen to hear his answer on why the Biomax 900 isn't as powerful as the 600 on a per LED basis. So I asked him about that. As well as that, we talk about many things such as LED wattage, the difference between 3 and 5 watt LEDs, if there is a difference. We talk about the hotspot issues, if it is an issue at all, at least based on Mark's feedback. We look at other things happening with the panels, the copycat clone companies out there that you've seen a lot of similar panels, and why you may want to be wary of them. Lots and lots of stuff. So highly recommend sitting back, enjoying this video. And if you have any questions for myself or Mark, please leave them below and I'll do my best to get them answered for you. Alright guys, let's get into it. I will mention we dive straight into the interview. We were pressed for time, so there was no real intro. We just dive straight in. So enjoy. Hey Mark, alright, so let's dive straight into this. Tell me, how did you get into the red light therapy space?
Sure. Well, that's actually a long story. As you may or may not know, Platinum LED has been around actually since about 2010. I personally started at Platinum LED in the horticultural field after, to be honest, I've been playing with LEDs and light for quite some time. When I first discovered the concept of controlled wavelengths and emitting very specific wavelengths to accomplish various things, I thought it was fascinating. With plants, it's actually quite technical. You're dealing with absorption curves, actually much more technical than human therapy. And so I really got into that, and Platinum LED, long story short, became the most recognized and largest LED grow light company in the world through about the mid 2010s. Around about 2015, actually, somebody came to us and first asked me if we would consider putting red LEDs in our grow lights. We had the de facto standard of the most powerful grow lights. What we did with Platinum LED was learn how to make the most powerful LED panel that we could. And that's a whole nother story. But regarding red light therapy, somebody came to us and said, hey, can you put red lights in these? And I had no idea why they were asking me this. I had no idea about it. We said, well, sure. So we put these custom red and near infrared LEDs in these lights and released them to people. And they went, oh my God, do you realize what you created here? And the response was overwhelming. I mean, now these things actually had power. So we were actually the first what came to be red light therapy company to develop an ultra high power red therapy light such as this. And up until now, at that time, nobody had ever seen this type of power in a panel. And so the response was overwhelming. And we released them publicly actually for the first time in 2016. Again, we were the first to actually make these types of lights in the current style that they're in now. And then the response was continued to be so overwhelming that we first made a whole separate website, whatnot, and really started going hard with it in end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And we haven't stopped. We continue our development today and leading the pack, if you will.
Wow.
So it's not a casual relationship at all.
Yeah.
It's a very in-depth relationship.
That's yeah, that's I didn't know that entire backstory. It's quite interesting. So tell me, when you're approached by this customer to put the red light LEDs in there, did you weren't aware of red light therapy or photobiomodulation or anything
No,
like that?
I was not. I had never heard of this, and I couldn't figure out why. And then when I found out why, Sterling technology, it became completely fascinating to me, because again, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with controlled wavelengths of light. And it's very interesting, the parallels to how we use LED panels to grow plants with is pretty much almost exactly and very similar to what we're doing with human therapy. Both plants and humans have an absorption ratio and window, if you will. Both our human skin and tissue will absorb a very narrow range of wavelengths of light, just like plants. In fact, green chlorophyll physically sees certain wavelengths of light more than others. So in plants, we actually developed up to using 12 different colors to emit a mapped out wavelength of overall spectrum of light, that matches exactly what's being absorbed. It's efficiency in output. So with human therapy lights, again, we're working with windows of absorption in the 600, 800 range. And basically it's the same concept. You want to emit light that's being absorbed to the maximum in that usable range. It's the exact same concept. The only difference is that with humans, we literally have windows. Our tissue physically rejects wavelengths in other wavelengths, whereas plants will still see it. So you want to still emit some of that. But with humans, we want to go right in there and get in with exactly what's being absorbed. So at the core, what we are LED panel manufacturers and designers, producing the highest quality lights possible, and experts in working with very specific wavelengths of light. I find it fascinating myself. It's really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, so for those naysayers who say, "Oh, Platinum LED therapy is just a grow light company with a few marketing claims," I mean, you turn that around and say, "Well, for the reasons you just gave, like you have all the platforms and specialty engineering and building these products, and now you're learning that hey, the body responds." And obviously it's biology, from a biological point of view, it's a lot different to plants, but there's a lot of crossover. And so is that what you'd say to those people that, hey,
I'll say that I'll say to be very careful with anybody that presents non-truth, because they usually have something to hide, or it's a mark of desperation. What the truth is that who Platinum LED is we are primarily LED panel designers and manufacturers that are highly experienced working with very specific wavelengths to achieve a very specific goal. The only difference between an LED grow light and an LED therapy light for human use is the wavelengths of light used. Period. So if you want to go back and say, we're only grow lights, well, hey, guess what? We were the first company to produce a LED therapy light that looks like what everybody else is trying to copy now. So it's kind of ironic. It's just kind of ironic. So no, what the core is, because what you're dealing with is an LED panel. Okay. And at the core of it, an LED panel is we could just call it a box with lights, right? Well, what we're doing first and primarily is creating a high quality box of lights that emits the maximum amount of light possible. Then secondarily, now we're controlling the wavelengths and emitting a very specific overall wavelength of light output that's matching exactly what is being required for use. So the difference between a grow light and a human therapy light, nothing except the wavelengths of light used, period. Because that's cool, high quality LED light. Yeah.
And for anyone that's been following my work and blogs and videos and stuff will know that, hey, I've had extraordinary results with the Biomax, your Biomax panels. So it's I personally, obviously, am a big fan, and I know lots of my family and friends are as well. So these things work. What I'd like to explore a little bit more here
Sure.
is the wavelengths. So you mentioned how, yeah, the only real big difference is the wavelengths. Now, I know in the
Mhm.
space, the traditional norm is your 660 nanometer and 850 nanometer light. Your
Sure.
Biomax range
Mhm.
utilize 5 wavelengths in those panels.
Mhm.
Now, it's my understanding that I think 80% of the power is going to the 660 and 850. Could you elaborate a bit more on how you came up with those wavelengths
Sure.
or the understanding there?
Absolutely. By raw studies, because we didn't sit on our laurels. So, I mean, basically, if you go back in time and you look at the actual history of red light therapy, NASA developed it. Okay. They're the first ones to understand, excuse me, discover that these windows of absorption we're able to use wavelengths of light to stimulate adenosine triphosphate, and that your body will absorb light within these wavelengths. Now, then it was Dr. Hamblin that went back and took it a step further and literally started mapping out those curves, because you can map out absorption curves, okay, and look and see, okay, now as you get closer into a specified window, the tissue or target substance will absorb more of the light as you go through the wavelengths, right? It's the same thing as plants. You're just talking about different compounds and different tissues. So everybody went to the peak of those values is 660 and 850, because it's a curve. If you look at the actual curve of absorption, that's where it peaked. So the first therapy lights first ones were 660, and then we said, okay, well, now let's hit the other range in the 850. Target is 850, and everybody just sat back and made these lights. Said, okay, we're going to make these. Well, I personally went for a step further and said, wait a second, we're working with a window here, and I know that there's benefits to these other ranges because these other wavelengths, because it is a range of absorption. So I personally found the white papers. All this information is right out there. The studies done on 630, on 810, on 850, all of this individual wavelengths. And what I found very fascinating is, even though your wave being emitted is only 20 or 30 nanometers different than another wave, it can actually accomplish a slightly different set of goals and outcomes, which is absolutely fascinating. So, but then again, my own philosophy was, let's keep it to what we know works, the peak, and then add in these ancillary wavelengths to gather the other effects. And that's what we did. We designed our spectral output according to kind of a priority level. And to be quite honest, we came up with it and said, this is what we're going to do. And the results have been astounding. It's truly astounding. And here we are today, and we're still researching. There's still more out there, but we'll keep that for another day.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that fact that you mentioned that you're still learning, you're still researching, because that's the one frustration I have. Like, when you speak to, whether it's just a consumer in the space or someone who is making these panels, and they're like, oh no, all the research is on 660 and 850. And it's like, don't limit yourself, like what happens if we just haven't discovered something about, 640 or something like that. And the fact that you've touched in, looked into this, and your conclusions are similar to mine. Like, I know back in 2019, when I did my first body panel comparison series, like, I believe it was only your panel that had the alternative wavelengths, and that won your panel a lot of brownie points in my books. And now, I've just finished my 2021 panel comparison, and I don't know, off the top of my head, I'd say a third, maybe a third of the panels that I tested, 4 or 5 of them, all had multi-wave technology. So it's I think it's a good thing that, because like you said, there is clear evidence that some of these other wavelengths do have benefits. And I also like the fact that you appreciate that we are still learning as an industry as well. So
in industry, as everybody's still learning, what I find fascinating is that we are accomplishing things that still even scientists, quote unquote, don't understand how we're doing it. We're actually gearing up. We're very shortly beginning a study in conjunction with the National Institute on Aging to start doing serious white blood cell counts before and after, all kinds of very technical studies, along with very high power agencies, because even they don't understand how we're doing and accomplishing what we're accomplishing with our lights. It's literally on the cusp of society and of our knowledge as humans. But it's happening. And some of the things and applications that people are using our lights for, I would not believe if I didn't get to read personally the emails that we get, just thanking us and saying, I used your light for this XXX application because there was no other hope, and I just tried it and it worked. And thank you for changing my life or changing my spouse's life. I mean, I put to tears at times. It's amazing. And we still don't even know how we're fully doing that. All we can do is the best with the knowledge that we're given, and just build the best panels with the best technology that we can. And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. And again, I have talked long about the benefits, not only from a scientific point of view, but my own personal experience. And even last night, my wife is heavily pregnant. She's due in 2 weeks' time, and she was sitting there on the sofa getting ready for bed, and she started getting restless leg syndromes. And I was like, go try light therapy. And she was like, oh, does it work? And I said, oh, not. She's used red light therapy a lot before, so she understands that. But she's like, does it work for red light therapy? I was like, I don't know. I was like, we can probably dig up PubMed and have a look. But I was like, why don't you just go try it? So she just stood just with the lower panels. I had your 900s going and a first generation Biomax 600 going. And she just stood 5 minutes just with those panels showing on her legs. And I spoke to her this morning. I'm filming this 9 a.m. in the morning. She said, yeah, there was no restless leg last night. It stopped within a few minutes of using it. So yeah, there's just more and more stuff. And like you said, the main thing is just give it a go, and you've really got nothing to lose. But I want to move on now to your panels, specifically your new panels you launched this year. So for those that aren't familiar with the PlatinumLED therapy range, you had your original Biomax series. I think it was launched, I don't know, when was it? 2016?
2019. Biomax was launched, yes, mid to early 2019.
Yep, cool. And then this year, 2021, you launched your new upgraded second generation Biomax panels. So could you tell the viewers a little bit about these panels, how they're different?
Sure. Basically, it's output strength and functionality. What we did, in internals, it's always kind of funny to me. You can look at a white metal box and not realize what goes on inside these things and how different they all are. Truly, we've learned so much with the reliability. Things can go wrong over the years. That the components and circuitry inside the new lights are completely different than the first ones. Completely new series of drivers, completely new just builds, constructions, wires, everything, certain covers on certain components. All these things that we've learned of shipping these very heavy boxes around the world. Number one, how to make them more reliable, how to make them break less, how to just to generally improve the circuitry. So it's highly improved circuitry as far as the quality goes. Number two, the output. LED technology has increased over the last few years with regards to the chips inside of the LEDs. Not all LEDs obviously are created the same, none one by brand and quality, or by even within a certain manufacturer. There's different series within them. You're dealing with, we're pretty much all right now centered around the same 3-watt, basic 3-watt package, if you will. Okay. But within a 3-watt package, there's a huge variance inside of that actual diode that's inside that package. They're not all the same by far. So the new LEDs that we're using, along with the new circuitry that we have, deliver literally around 30 to 40% higher output than the previous Biomax generation. So we've got a much more higher output, which means deeper penetration, better results, and greater coverage, better output strength at a greater distance. So you're able to cover more. So performance and design, then also the functionality. What we did was we have a beautiful OLED responsive touchscreen display, and we're now the first company to offer individual dimming and customization of the individual arrays. Now we allow you to actually change the percentage outputs of both the red, which we call our R plus, and our NIR plus arrays independently of each other, because there are some users that want to customize that. Some users don't want to take back the NIR if there may be existing hyperpigmentation concerns, whatever their individual concerns or treatment protocols may be. We put that customization power in the customer's hands. On top of additional functionality, the panels now wirelessly connect, so that you, number one, don't need a cable running to them when you connect multiples together. But now what you can do is, many of our commercial clients, our professional sports teams, clinics and whatnot, they use two individual arrays on the front and back of their body. Yeah. And now both of those arrays can be synchronized at the same time without having wires running around your body, because they're wirelessly talking to each other. So we go on. We even make you're able to make individual groups of lights. So when we're working with clinics that have multiple setups, that one user's lights aren't interfering with another. So they're extremely technologically advanced. And of course, this wireless functionality can be turned off for those that are concerned with the wireless. But again, it is very low power, 2.4 gigahertz, which is the exact same thing that's your cell phone, wireless routers, everything else is using. It's very very commonplace, low impact wave.
Very cool.
So
yeah,
better and better.
I've reviewed a couple of these new panels, so for those of you who do want to take a deep dive, check those out. And I do have to say the touchscreen panel is very nice. I was like, wow, this is getting pretty fancy for a red light therapy.
Beautiful.
Panel, right?
I'm blown away. I step back and I personally have them in my house, and I'll never forget that sometimes I just stop and stare and go, wow, man.
No,
come a long way. This is incredible. This is quite a beautiful product. So and we're continuing to develop. We're experimenting with all types of production and different designs. I mean, that's who we are. We are, the difference again is that we are producers and designers of panels. We're not resellers. We're not just slapping we're not marketing. We're not a marketing company that decided to sell red light therapy panels.
Yes.
We are high power LED manufacturers and designers. So that doesn't stop. I can't wait till you see some of the different directions we're taking this concept of bringing this to the masses.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I should mention, as someone who has used and tested a lot of panels, especially recently, I like the fact that you've incorporated these new features into a panel that actually add value and are functional and practical, without just adding them for the sake of scoring a few more points from a marketing point of view. And
sure,
and
exactly.
I have to admit, when the touchscreen panel when you mentioned that it was going to be a feature, I actually thought, okay, this is going to be a bit of a gimmick, and it's going to make controlling these panels like more, difficult, right? But it wasn't. I mean, everything worked really well. Whereas, I don't want to mention names and stuff, but some other companies bring out all these advanced bells and whistles and features, and you're kind of like, it's taking me away from using a red light therapy panel, right? I just want to run it, I
just want to use it. How do we use it exactly? And that's exactly what whenever you design something, we design something to answer a consumer question or problem. Okay, what are we giving exactly? We look at functionality. What can we give? What design or usability issue can we accomplish by changing a design, right? And so we came down to, we want to make these more accessible. We want it easier to use, ease of use, customability. We don't need things like, I'll give you an example, pulsed therapy. There is no basis whatsoever that has any proven benefit with LED lighting. Pulsed lighting, the whole reason that was a benefit in in light therapy was because it was used for laser-based systems, and lasers had a high surface temperature and overheat your cells, and basically it would cook your cells for a second. And so they found that if they stopped the LED, they pulsed the laser light, it would let your cell temperature cool down slightly so that the light could then be absorbed when it came back and pulsed again. Has no application to LED lighting because we're not overheating cells. So,
right.
And we refuse to go down that road because we're just not going to do anything that isn't a proven benefit, that's the truth, that is an added benefit and an added bonus to the actual use of our lights and to our users. We're just not going to do it.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. So I've got a couple of questions or topics here I'd like you to touch on. The first one is 3 watt versus 5 watt LEDs. Now, I personally, in the last few months, based on my own research and realizing that at the end of the day, look, the way I think of it now is at the end of the day, all I need to measure is irradiance, and I use my spectrometer to do that.
Exactly.
And I've found that a panel, I used to think the 5 watt ones were going to be more powerful. After testing a lot of panels this year, I've realized that there's no direct correlation. So it doesn't matter if it's a 1 watt, 3 watt, 5 watt. At the end of the day, it's the radiance that matters. Is that what you believe as well?
Well, this is the long and the short of the LED wattage debate. This is something that we started dealing with way back in LED grow lights, because everybody's looking for a leg to get up on another company, right? So they're like, okay, well, what can we do to make our lights either better or perceived better? So when we were dealing with LED grow lights, all of a sudden this big trend came in to try and use higher wattage LEDs, because to the consumer, the number sounds greater. Well, 5 is better than 3, and now we can call our light a 1500 versus a 900 or whatever, and that's a bigger number, so that's better, right? But the fact of the matter is that 3 watt has been that we designed, came up with the current design of the 3 watt, all those 3 watt lights in a LED panel box that you're seeing. Platinum LED came up with that back in 2010, because we realized that 3 watt was the exact right blend of output strength and heat. Because when you're dealing with a light, the higher wattage of LED, you're going to be creating more heat, so you can't have them as close together. You can only fit so many in a box. Number 2, the efficiency curves with LEDs, wattage just changes. LEDs are always going to emit, how do I put this correctly? LEDs are always going to be more efficient the more higher to their capacity that you're pushing them. The higher the wattage of an LED, the closer to its maximum capacity do you have to run it in order for it to ramp up to its full capacity brightness. So a 3 watt LED will, say at 60% of, remember, on all these lights that you see, you're never ever pushing LEDs to their full power, because you would lower the lifespan of the LED greatly, and you would not allow it to be used for such a continuous amount of time. So all these panels will always consume less power than they're fully rated for, and that's on purpose. That's by design. So it typically ran about 60% of their full capacity. A 3 watt LED at 60% will emit more light energy than a 5 watt LED at 60%. And this has to do with the higher the wattage of the LED, the closer it'll ramp up. Now, if we're running at like 80%, then it would be emit more, but we're not, and we can't. So a 3 watt LED will outperform any other wattage of LED because of the type of construction we're doing, how close we're putting LEDs in, and the overall construction style, period. Yeah. So now that's one side of the equation. Now, this is the honest to God truth. And I will make this open declaration. This is the honest to God truth. Every single other current LED light therapy, quote unquote, company that is claiming to use 5 watt LEDs is not, and they are lying. It is as obvious as to anybody that knows what they're looking at as the nose on your face. Because a 5 watt LED, a true 5 watt LED, looks completely different than what all these LEDs look like. And notice how they all look the same? Well, guess what? Because they're all 3 watt LEDs. And, I don't know if I fully blame a lot of these resellers. I don't even know if a lot of them don't know better, because whatever clandestine Chinese factory that they're just reselling lights from is probably telling them that they're 5 watt, and they don't even know what they're looking at, because they're not even LED manufacturers to begin with. Right. But to anybody that knows, it's ridiculous. So we have the data sheets on these people that are claiming, and they've been put on notice, and they've been requested to change their information, or this information is going to be made much more public, and they know. So this is going to change over time. Either the truth is going to be told, and the consumer is going to stop being lied to. They're still going to stop being lied to one way or the other, because it's not fair to the consumer. And again, there are no current 5 watt LED based systems that we have seen on the market. They're all 3 watt. So
at the end of the day, though, a consumer should not get caught up in the
Yeah.
wattage of the LEDs
Yes.
and instead look at what
Exactly. Look at the facts. I mean, let's not even. It truly. I won't use profanity here, but it really upsets me because it's bold-faced lying to consumers to simply try and put a higher number value to say, well, because ours says a higher number, we're better, and that's the only reason they're doing it. And it's a bold-faced lie. Number one, and number two. The main thing is it shouldn't matter because what you look at is what's actually coming out of the light.
Totally. Yeah.
And you can go back and look at some of the videos that I personally produced way back, and they're still up on the internet, where I physically tested other grow lights using these higher wattage. They had LED grow lights that used 20-watt LEDs. The output was so dismal. It was comical. The higher wattage LEDs that these Chinese companies tried to use to have a higher number, the worse they got. And they literally at one point got to 20-watt LEDs, and the output was so small. It was, and we're going, oh my God. It was, anyways. So
no, that's very interesting. And it's why now, again, well, I mean, based on all my testing I've done, the highest peak I've ever noticed, peak of radiance, is in your new Biomax 600. And like I said, that uses a 3-watt LED, and these other companies that say they have higher powered LEDs, but they're not putting out the same numbers. So that's why I've just stopped even using those data, the wattage figures, the LED wattage figures in my reviews, because I realized it's just confusing customers. So no, that's good. Thank you.
Let's keep it fact-based. Let's keep it fact-based. That's what's one thing I major respect your role in the industry, Alex, is keeping things fact-based, staying away from the gossip, and keeping it what we should be looking at, which is the actual performance and output.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, and I'm always learning. I'm sure I'll look back in a few years' time and realize I got a few more things wrong. But anyway, so I've got 2 more quick questions I want to touch on about your new panels, and then we'll have to wrap it up. But there are still tons of things I would like to ask, so we may have to come back another day and do this again. Sure. But the first one, and this is on behalf of the community and obviously myself as well, but the power difference between the Biomax 600 and your new Biomax 900. Why is the 900 not as powerful from a per LED point of view? What's going on here?
Because this is why. Because the United States, we're dealing with voltage with home circuit breakers are limited to 15 amps. Okay. The largest setup that a customer would use on a single circuit breaker is 4 Biomax 900s. What we are required to do for electrical safety is to design the overall draw to not exceed at least around 14 amps. Because that's the limitations of a home circuit breaker. So if you do the math, that requires us to keep the wattage on the Biomax 900 specifically a little bit lower, so that when 4 of them are put together, we're not exceeding the amperage load. That's why. Right. So the 600 we can, and now again, here's LED science, and here's proof in the pudding. When you push an LED closer to its capacity, you will get higher radiance, right? So that's why the 600 is actually driven a little bit higher towards its overall percentage capacity as an LED, and why you can start to see a little bit higher peak output because of it. But now we shouldn't be confused between peak output and then also the overall light output. You're dealing with, you may be seeing higher peak, but you're also dealing with 200 versus 300 LEDs.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not just peak power, but how many LEDs are physically emitting this light. Of course, the 900 overall is still emitting more light because you're using 50% more LEDs, 200 versus 300. It's just that it's more spread out.
That explains a lot, because I knew there was a difference. I'd seen it myself, and I know you'd mentioned it in an email. But I wasn't 100% sure as to the exact reasoning. So that's it's very useful information. And you touch on something very important, that it's not just, don't get caught up just in that peak. Remember that the 900 does have the more LEDs. Now, what I'm going to be doing is doing a full review of the new Biomax 900 in time, and I will be doing all my usual testing and being able to compare and quantify it with the 600 and also with some other leading panels on the market today. So that's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to doing that. And it's something that I personally like the 900 because it's a wider panel. I like that. You put two 900s on top of each other and you have what I think is a really good setup. And the other thing is, sure, the power per LED might be a little bit lower than the 600, but it's still more powerful than the first generation ones. And those first generation Biomaxes were already incredibly powerful, and I was getting amazing results with them. In fact,
don't get caught up in individual peak power, because you're still dealing with a number of LEDs emitting a total amount of light. Right. There's peak power, and peak power, honestly, its place is very good for where that's very beneficial is comparing two panels next to each other, because those numbers can't lie. Right. It just don't lie. Same meter in the same environment, next to next, that does not lie. That's still the most transparent way to compare multiple panels. But when you get away from comparison and you start talking about overall light output, because you have to measure the total amount of light that's being emitted, that's where it starts to get a little bit sometimes not the best way to give the whole statistic of the light, because you're not able to measure entire LED output. So still, when somebody asks us, well, why would I want, what's the difference between the Biomax 900 and 600? Really, is it just the width is only 3 inches different? Because you're literally dealing with 50% more LEDs. Yes. You're dealing with almost 50% more light output. Yeah. So you really need to look at the number of LEDs used when you're comparing, within the series of lights, what you're really getting.
Very good. All right, I have one more question. And it is, I don't know if you've seen my 2021 comparison series yet. If you haven't, I highly recommend checking it out. Now, in that series, I think it was round 8, I looked at something, I'm going to put it out there, maybe a little bit controversial, and that was the hotspot effect, right? The concentration of light, specifically like, like some of the smaller weight. I know in your panel you have some of those alternative wavelengths, what I call alternative wavelengths with less LEDs, and we've already covered this earlier. But with your particular panel, and it's not just yours, you see it in quite a few panels. At 6 inches, 4, 5, 6 inches, you see concentrations of light, right?
Sure.
Now that I test all that and I explain all that in my series round 8. I'll put links to that below for those that are watching and want to check that out. Now, obviously, your panel didn't do as well in that round and lost a few potential points. What is your understanding of this? If it's someone that's out there that was highly, was really keen to buy a Biomax and they see that, what would you like to say to them? Like, what's your understanding? What are your thoughts here? Have I wasted a ton of time filming this, particular topic? Should I just ignore it altogether? Or is it a potential issue, but there are workarounds? I'm curious. What are your thoughts?
Well, having mega high power LEDs that are so ridiculously high power can have is a double-edged sword, because what you're seeing is the fact that our LEDs are so flippin' powerful and emitting so much light. You're seeing the differences as you move in between the individual LEDs, because there's such a high peak value there. If they were a little bit lower and it kind of blended together, you'd see a little bit more of a blending. But it's the visible. It's the same kind of effect where with your eyes per se, where you shine a light and you see this footprint. And when you have a mega high power light, you're going to see it really bright. Obviously with your eyes right in the middle where everything's mixing. And then as you go out, your customer's saying, well, this isn't affecting over here on the sides. Well, really what's happening is you're looking with your own eyes, and because the difference between the bright and the not bright is so great, because the bright is so bright, it really makes it very much more dramatic. Whereas you don't even realize how much light is actually being emitted, because the really high power part is really overpowering everything else. And it gives that more of a perceived hotspot effect. And it's just a part of having very high power LEDs, to be honest. But what we're working here, remember, is that we're working with the blending is all there, whether you perceive it or not. And you're dealing with light being emitted at a set angle. It's going into your body. Remember, we're using the lights typically at around, about 8 inches or so. And there's plenty of blending there, and there's no any perceived dotting effect has absolutely nothing to do with performance whatsoever. None. All of that light's going right in your tissue and all being mixed very, very readily.
And that is, yeah, those are all good points. And it's something that I did touch on in that round, because of the higher powered LEDs we're seeing now. To simply step back a few inches, you go from 6 inches to 8 inches, that light hotspot effect is diminished and you see much more of a blend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look at the lights and how you actually, I would say test the lights and look at how they're actually being used. You wouldn't measure your light output at 0 inches, even though comically some people do. You would measure your light output and your light strength at the distance you're going to use the light, right? Which is 6, 8, 12 inches, something like that. That's really where you should be looking at things.
Yeah. Mark, it's been absolutely awesome. I really appreciate the time. And yeah, I literally have about 15 more questions and topics I wanted to touch on, but I've ran out of time here. So thank you so much. And for those listening, where can they find more information about your products?
Everywhere, PlatinumTherapyLights.com. Everything is right there. And stay tuned. There's a lot coming out. There's a lot of expansion going on, a lot of rapid development in the background. We're not resting. Different mounting systems, different light features. One really cool thing about our software is our lights is we're able to upgrade the software at any time. So it's a really cool thing. We're really excited about what we're doing here and the studies we're getting ready to do with major agencies and government agencies.
I don't know. That sounds very, very promising and exciting at the same time. So I'm looking forward to see what the next year or two brings. And again, thank you for your time, and we'll definitely have to do this again sometime. So, all right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it was a great conversation, and like I said in the interview, I'm really keen to do a follow-up one next year. So if there's any topics or questions you want me to cover in that follow-up interview, please leave them below. By the way, if you want to check out any of the Biomax panels or the Platinum LED panels, I'll put a link below. I should clarify, Platinum LED is the company, the Biomax range is his premium red light therapy range, the ones that I test and reviewed in my body panel comparison series this year. If you do decide you want to purchase any of these, be sure to use discount code ALEX, ALEX. It will save you 5%, and it does give me a little bit of a cutback, but that helps me continue to do these videos and all the editing and all that, so I do appreciate it. If you haven't already seen my reviews of the new Biomax 600, check that out, and I will be doing a full review of the Biomax 900 as well, so be sure to subscribe for that. Alright guys, talk to you soon, bye.